For this project, I'm examining Roland Emmerich's 2019 film, Midway, a war epic that covers 6 months of the Pacific theater of World War II, from the attack on Pearl Harbor through the Douglas raids to the Battle of Midway itself, June of 1942. I choose this film because it occupies a strange but interesting position. It is an American war film that about American triumph funded by Chinese conglomerates. It is also a film that exists in direct confrontation to an earlier version of itself, the 1976 film, also called Midway, who was made by Ford. It is a movie that was built from the grounds up to correct those records. And it gives a lot of unpack about how and why history gets made into entertainment. My argument for in this is Midway is a rare case where a director famous for taking historical liberties uses accuracy itself as a spectacle. But that accuracy was and is shaped in some cases by the financial and political pressure of said Chinese backers. So let me give you some historical basis. The Battle of Midway took place in June 4th to June 7th, 1942, near Midway, 7 months after Pearl Harbor. Admiral Yamato sent a large Japanese task force to seize Midway, partially in response to the Douglas raids on Tokyo. American codebreakers, however, had cracked the Japanese naval communications and was giving the U.S. Navy a critical intelligence advantage. Using the hastily repaired Yorktown and a relatively inexperienced group of pilots, American forces located and sank four of the Japanese carriers, a loss from which the Imperial Navy had never fully recovered. It's widely considered the turning point of the Pacific War. The film dramatizes this using real historical figures throughout, such as Admiral Nitz, Admiral Yamato, Admiral Namagoto, such American pilots such as Dick Best and Bruno Gady. And what's notable is how much the film is mostly dramatic material is actually documented, truly fact, such as Dick Best really did bomb two Japanese aircraft carriers in a single day while struggling with oxygen faulty supply. And Bruno was actually promoted on the site after getting into a Douglas to shoot down an enemy bomber that was going to ram itself into the carrier. Emmerich has said in interviews that his intentions going in was not to invent characters or events, but to document what actually happened, and that some of these true events were so extraordinary they barely needed dramatizing. So this is a good source. And this is where I heavily go into my comparison to the 1976 film. The early Midway, starring Charles Heston, is remembered by historians as very thin on accuracy, and also it very heavily portrays characters in a certain way. So when people got around to hearing that Roland Emmerich was going to do a film about the same event, a lot of people were skeptical at best. But most of the consensus was, yeah, he did a great job. It was very much more authentic than not for a lot of the people there. Which is kind of cool because he's a director known for blowing up the gosh darn U.S. monuments. Um, and he did this by using, filming techniques such as modern digital technology to reconstruct real ships, real formations, and real combat sequences at a scale that is simply just not possible with models or stock footage. So this film can function as a legitimate historical source. I argue yes, as an entry point, but not as like an overall arching understanding of the Battle of Midway. It can teach you genuine it can teach you most of it, and to a broad audience it's a pretty good source. But if you really want to get into the neat and gritty of it, not really. So what was wrong with it? Which surprisingly not a lot. On the accuracy side, everyone that was listed was a real person. The heroic acts did happen, and the timeline basically follows beat by beat the history of it all. The only difference is a couple things like the sub that was there didn't attack the carrier. The pilots during the last attack were switched. We have no clue if the Japanese generals actually talked about where the American positions were going to be at. Just minor details more than anything else. But one of the bigger ones was Douglas seeing Chinese civilians being shot. Did that happen? Yes. Did Douglas see it? No. Or unsure, I should say. So that begs the question: what's the motivation for making this film in the first place? And that's where it gets kind of surprising. Midway is one of the most expensive independent films ever made. Roughly 45% of its budget came from Chinese investors. Companies such as Starlight, Ryu Media, and Bana Film Group, who pre-sold distribution rights at Carney's in 2017 before an American distributor was even attached to the film. Thinking about what this means, this is an American film celebrating American victory triumphed over an East Asian imperial power. That is substantially financed by a Chinese conglomerate and is released in Chinese theaters at the exact moment that U.S. and Chinese relationships, especially due to trade, was kind of rocky. And it got through Chinese censorship, while two other entirely Chinese-made war films dealing with the same facts or same enemies were stuck in censor limbo at the same time. That's a strange contradictory worth exploring. A state-censored system clearing a film glorifying a foreign military power over Japan while holding back domestic films about the same historical adversary. It suggests that shared hostility towards a common historical enemy can override some of the usual political sensitivity around foreign military glorification. The reception in China, though, was mixed. Its opening week kind of disappointing. And it just didn't really do well. But in America, it was pretty well. I mean, did really well, and surprisingly did well, knowing that Dunkirk in 1917 came out roughly the same period. So the competition was high, expectations were high, and it did pretty well. However, another thing that it was missing, in my humble opinion, is that there were some voices left out, such as African Americans in America, the Japanese concentration camps in America, or even the Navajo, who were mostly the basis of code breaking. A big one for me as well is the Japanese voices in the film Midway, 2019 Midway. The film portrays the Japanese as a one-set mind, evil organization for the most part. The big bad. Showing shooting of civilians, taking up prisoners by tying Gilliman to an anchor and throwing him overboard. Which, I mean, I don't know how true that event is either, but these are humans. Yes, humans can do evil things, but let's not just make them out to be demons. Both sides have done bad. Both sides can do bad. Midway sits kind of squarely in the factual records but dramatized for the screen category for me. It's not really using historical or history as an analogy for a contemporary conversatory that way some other historical films do, such as early 2000s when Bush era. It's not primarily interested in the atmosphere or the mood, the way a more personic period a piece might be. It wants you to believe that what you're watching essentially happened. But I argued it's also functions as a less than historical graphic. Because the film is very existence as the more accurate version of an earlier, less accurate version, tells us something about how standards for historical filmmaking has shifted between then and now. The audience post Saving Private Ryan has expected a level of viscosity, technicality, and grounded realism that simply wasn't possible, or maybe wasn't even expected 40 years ago. And the leap in digital visual effects technology is what actually made that possible, and more than anything, changed the research rigorate. The tools available at the time of filming shapes how history gets told, just as much as the research does. So where does that leave us at with Midway? I say the film that successfully, unusually well at the level of factual technical accuracy, uh, genuinely more than the reputation of the director himself. But I do believe the film was shaped by financial backers of the Chinese co-financing uh, And its studios need the reason why is because I think it's because I mean its studio needed to clear not only America nostalgia but Chinese censor review all the whole way through, which is kind of pushed it to be a very narrow version of what really happened. And that's the core of the tension I want to leave you with. A film can be meticulous, verifiably accurate about individual facts, and still can be quietly shaped by the pressures that have nothing to do with historical truth.